Hey, this is Max here, and by the end of this tutorial you'll know exactly how to use external requests in ManyChat without being a programmer. I will explain what they are, what you can do with it, and I will show you a bunch of cool examples. So let's just dive right in. So what is an external request exactly? So the external request is an action inside ManyChat that allows you to send and also receive all kinds of data from other tools. You can, for example, add a contact to your email list, register subscribers to a webinar, validate email addresses, or even trigger Integromat webhooks. Now, why would you use them in the first place? Now, you can basically expand the functionality of ManyChat and really unlock a world of possibilities. Because not everything you maybe want to do is possible within ManyChat, but by connecting other tools with those external requests, you can really do lots of cool things, which will also show you in a bit. Now, how do you set them up? Now, this is actually really simple. You have to add an action to your flows, or you can also use them inside automation rules. And as soon as you create them, I'll show you in a bit how you do that, you'll get a configuration window. And inside the configuration window, you can set all these things. So let's go over to ManyChat and then I'll show you how you do that. So here I already prepared some examples. What I first want to do is I just want to create a new one. So to add an action, you go over to this, you go down here and you click action. Then I place it here and then here it says click to add an action. I click and then here I click again. Then you scroll down over here and then over here you'll find external request. So you just click that and then you click here again to add your request. And then you get that configuration window that I just talked about. So there's a bunch of things that you can set here. So the first thing is request type. So is it a post or a get? So post is usually used to send something over to another tool, and get is to retrieve some kind of data. So usually the tool that you're using will tell you what you're going to need. The biggest difference is that with get, you cannot use the body, then you have to put everything in your request URL. And with post, you can also use the body, which will also show you in a bit. So that is that. And then you have your request URL. So this is where you want to send your data over to. And like it says here, only HTTPS, so only secure links are allowed in there. Now then underneath, you will find basically 4 different kind of windows. So you have here headers, body, response, and response mapping. So headers is basically additional info to your request. And often this is used for authentication. I'll also show you an example of that in a bit. Now, what you basically have here inside your headers is you have key and you have value. So how I would compare this is maybe to a custom field. So then this is, for example, the name of a custom field, and then this is the value of a custom field. So sometimes you, for example, have to say here API token. So this is like the name of that row. And then here you would have to add the API token, so the value of that. So that is just one example. Now then you have the body. So this is actually what do you want to send over to that tool. Now I will show you in a bit how you can write really simple JSON here. You really do not have to be a programmer for that. I'm also not a programmer. It's super duper easy, so I'll explain that in a bit. Then you have your response, and this is what you get back from that tool. So you do your request, you can also here test your request, and then you get a response back from that. Some tools just say, OK, we received your request, and other tools really say, OK, we received your request, and here is what we have back for you. So for example, when you want to add a contact to your email service provider, then your email service provider probably responds back with like, hey, we added this person to your email list and here is the contact ID for that person. I'll also show you in a bit how that works. And then response mapping is for what you want to do with that response. So like I just said, sometimes you get back a contact ID if you add someone to your email service provider. Then over here, you can enter the JSON path, which will also show you in a bit, which means that you can basically store a little part of that response into a custom field of your choice. And that is basically how the external request works. Now, how do you write simple JSON for that? Now, so like I just said, you really do not have to be a programmer for this. It's super duper easy. So how do you write it? So this is a simple example of a key and a value. So this is the name of the thing that you want to send over basically. So you always start with a curly bracket, then with the key between quotes, then a colon, and then another quote, and then the value and another quote, and then another curly bracket to close it off. Now here is another simple example with multiple rows and then actual values. So you see here that our key is first name, and the value of that is Max, because my name is Max, right? Now then we have last name, and then here it says Van Collenburg. Then email, and then my email address. So this is just an example of how I could, for example, send over my first name, last name, and email address to a tool. And what is important here to mention is that you also have commas to close it off. So if you just have one row, you do not have a comma. But if you have multiple rows, you always close each row basically with a comma, except for the last one. Over here, you do not include a comma, otherwise you're going to get errors. So this is what that looks like inside an external request. So over here you see that I've set this to post, and then this is the request URL, and then in here you see the request body, and there you see what I just explained over here. First name, last name, email. Now what you can do here is obviously you do not have to type those values like Max van Collenburg, hello@maxvancollenburg.com. You do not have to type those things. You can use variables in there like you would do inside a regular flow inside, for example, a send message block. So you just type this here. We can maybe just type this again. So here I would colon first name, and then what you can do is you can type two of these curly brackets, and then you get here first name. You can also click this, but it's slightly more work. Then we close it off. Then here I say last name, and then I do again this shortcode, last name. And then what is also important here, by the way, is that you uncheck these encode to JSON, because when you do that, you're also going to get errors here. So just make sure that this is always turned off. And then we do this again, and then over here is an email, and then I select the email system field. So you can also type in here, and then you just get every match. So it's really handy to save some time as well. And then here, and then no comma, and then we close it off, and then you see over here in the preview that we do not get an error. So if I add here a comma, then you see here that it says invalid JSON. Now, and that is basically that. And then you can click test the request. So now it's not going to work because it's just a random URL. And then you see that we get an error over here. So that's also quite handy. But otherwise you would get the response here, and then response mapping you could fill out here. Now, what I want to do so that you really understand how all of this works, and also that you really see the potential of this, is I want to show you some cool examples that I'm using in my business and that I think you would probably really like. So for example, my email service provider is ActiveCampaign. This works probably with every email service provider with an API, which is almost any, for example, MailChimp or ConvertKit or HubSpot or whatever you name it, they probably have it. So this is how it works with ActiveCampaign. So usually these tools always have some kind of documentation. So what I recommend you to do is read the documentation. And it seems always really technical, and it also kind of is, right? But if you just read through the lines, it's actually pretty easy. So here they give you the request URL. So this is your request URL. You only have to change your account name in here. And then this is the JSON. You can just copy that, and then you go back over to your external request, and then you fill it out in here, and you replace these things with the variables that we just talked about. So you see here that I added the email variable, first name variable, last name variable, and my phone number. But there's more to this. So we, for example, also have to authenticate with ActiveCampaign. So to do that, we go here to the introduction, authentication, and then you see here that they're asking for an API token and then your token. Now to do this, we have to add headers to our external request. So I hope you can still follow me. So here it says HTTP header named API token. So this tells us, okay, we have to add headers in our external request. So here I added API token, because here it says the API token, right? And then your token. And then I pasted my token in here. Now, if you're using ActiveCampaign, you can find this inside your settings. So then you have that, then I have this, and then the only thing that I have to do is to click test the request. Now, when I do this now, you will see that it's going to say it already exists. So here it says error code 422, unprocessable, and then here it says error, title, email address already exists in the system. So if I would change this, for example, I would just add some random numbers in front of this. So here I would say this, so then it's like a unique like a new email address, right? I test the request, and then you see here now that it says 201, created, contact, email, and then you get like all kinds of data, including what is cool here, and we have to go all the way to the back, I believe. Here it says ID 21. So the contact ID of this contact is 21. Now that is sometimes handy if you want to do other things with the ActiveCampaign API. I will not go too deep on that, but just so that you know that you have this over here, the ID, and then response mapping looks like this. We have $.contact.id, and I store this into a custom field called ActiveCampaign ID so that I can use this over and over and over again in maybe other external requests. But you do not have to do that. That's totally optional. So that is that example. So you can just do this. So you would basically add this external request right after you captured an email address inside one of your flows, or slightly more advanced, you can add this external request to one of your rules under automation. So if you go to here, automation, to rule, then you can create a new rule that will trigger as soon as the system value changes. So here I say here has changed to any value. So then when this happens, system field value changed, email has changed to any value, then perform these actions. And then over here, you can also add an external request. So that way, if you're asking multiple times for an email address, you only have to implement this once. So this is like a little hack that I wanted to show you. Now then the next example is cool if you're doing webinars. So for my webinar software, I'm using Demio, but this also works with other things. Then we quickly go into the documentation again. And then you see over here that we go down here to registration. Then you see that we get a URL here. So this is the URL that we need. And then down here, you see the request. Now, if you go a little bit more down, you'll find the body that you're going to need. So you would just copy that. Then you go over to your external request, here, Demio webinar. And then here you would paste it inside the request body. And then here I added the ID of the webinar that if you're using Demio, you can find it in the URL of the event. And then I add the full name variable and the email address. Now what it also says, so here you already see headers, is that we have to authenticate somehow. So to find that, you usually go to the intro, and then here it says authorization. And then down here you see ping via headers. So you always have to look for that headers word. And then you see that you need to add the headers, API key, and API secret. So then we go back over to our external request, and you see here that I have API key, API secret. So it's not super easy to understand this, I think, when you're really not a programmer, but just look for the word headers and authentication, and then you usually find it. And then these values you can find inside your account, and then you would have to add those there. Now then we have the body already. So let's see what happens when we test the request. Now when I test the request, and it says 201 created, so it was successful. And then what is cool here, that it's going to return the join link. So this is the unique link that the subscriber can join with to attend the webinar. And because we have this link, we can just use that inside our conversations. So we can just give them the link, or we can even use that link inside a button. So to do that, we have to use response mapping. So you see over here that we have join link. So then we use the money sign, the dollar sign, dot join link, right here, join link. And then we store this into a custom field or a user field called a webinar unique URL. So this is a user field that I created. And then this variable you can use again inside your conversation. So to send a message with that URL, or like I said earlier, inside a button. So I think that is a pretty cool use case as well. Now the next one is also slightly more advanced, but pretty cool, I think, and it is to validate email addresses. So when you ask for an email address inside Facebook Messenger with ManyChat, you basically want to make sure it's a valid email address. Because some people, they use disposable email addresses, or they just type something random just to see what happens. And then these email addresses get added to your email service provider. And then you basically get a low quality list if you do not really basically guard who is entering that list. So to make sure that the list quality stays high, you have to validate your email addresses. And I'm using a tool for that called NeverBounce. And with NeverBounce, you basically give them the email address and they will do all kinds of checks to see if it really exists, if it is disposable, or if it's a catch-all email address. So what we do is we need to make a request to this URL. So that looks like this over here. Validate with NeverBounce. And then you see that we have the URL over here. See, we have this. And then what is slightly different here, you can basically always do this in two ways. You can add the body kind of to the URL itself. So here they just say, okay, add the key, and then the key and the email address to your URL to tell us which email address you want to validate. But you can also use it inside the body, and I prefer that. So I just use the first part and then I use key. So this is the API key, and then I add my API key and then the email and then the email address I want to add. And then if I test the request, then you see that I'm going to get a response, and then it says result is catch all. And then I want to store that result with the JSON path here, so $.result into the multi-field. So multi-field is just like basically a user field that I use for everything. And then with conditions, you can check what the value is. So for example, if I would enter a random email address here at lalala.com, then you see that it says here result is invalid. So this is an invalid email address. So then the value of multi-field will be invalid. And then with a condition, you can check that value. So I know this is slightly more advanced, but I have a separate tutorial about this if you want to learn exactly how that works. Now, then the last example that I want to show you, and this is probably the most flexible of all of them, and it is how you can start a scenario in Integromat. So Integromat is basically a tool that allows you to connect all kinds of tools without any programming knowledge. So I will show you how that works in a bit. So what we do inside our scenarios, this is a scenario, this is Integromat, and what we want to do here is we want to create a webhook. So I'm going to create a new webhook. Here I say custom webhook, add, and then here I say ManyChat, receive, awesome, data, click save. Then you see here that I'm going to get a request URL that I'm expected to send data to. So I copy this, and then I go down here, then I paste that request URL, and then you have to add inside your body what you want to send over to Integromat. So this is totally up to you because it depends what your scenario is for. So for example, I have a variable to send the full subscriber data. So it will send everything that ManyChat basically knows about that subscriber. So for example, their first name, their last name, their full name, their gender, their profile picture, their language, their time zone. Basically everything that is available about the subscriber will be sent over. But you can also type your own request in there. So when I click now test the request, then you see here that it says OK, accepted. Then I go over here and then it says data structure is successfully determined. Now what I recommend you to do then, if you use Integromat, is click save, click run once, and do it one more time. Test the request. Because then you can use all this data as variables inside your next steps. So what you can do here, you can add another module, and then you can basically do everything. Imagine you use MailChimp. Then here MailChimp, and you can say, oh, I want to add or update a contact inside MailChimp. Or if you use ActiveCampaign, then you can do something with ActiveCampaign. If you use Drip, you can do something with Drip. If you use HubSpot, you can do something with HubSpot. If you want to send an email with Gmail, that's also possible. If you want to do another request to another tool, that you can also do. So it's really flexible what you can do with this. I use it for all kinds of things. It's really, really flexible. So that was basically this tutorial about external requests. So I hope that this helped you understand how they work, what you can do with it, and also all the possibilities. So I know that this is a bit of a techy tutorial, so it's totally normal if you did not understand every little thingy. But if you have any questions about anything that I just showed you, just let me know in the comments below and I would be super happy to help you out. And also all the examples that I just showed you, I will make sure that under this video I put a link so that you can just import those into ManyChat and change them to your own needs. Now if you enjoyed this tutorial, give it a little thumbs up, that would help me a lot, and I will see you in the next one.